Welcome to Entrepreneurship via the Unconventional Path. Hi, I'm Bela and
And I'm Mike Wasserman. And hey, Bela, something changed. Our longtime listeners will notice that the name of the podcast changed. When we started this a few years ago, it was The Unconventional Path, Entrepreneurship and Innovation Stories and Ideas with Bela and Mike. And now our new, much shorter and improved name, Bela, thank you, is Entrepreneurship via the Unconventional Path. Bela, you want to explain a little bit the logic behind the name change?
Yeah, so they often say don't change the name, don't change your brand name. But so what I've been doing is I've been trying to figure out how the search engines in these podcasting applications work because I want to make it easier for people to discover the podcast. And since the podcast is about entrepreneurship with the old name, the unconventional path, that's, entrepreneurship didn't show up until late in sort of the title. And some of these search engines in these podcasting apps only allow you so many letters or so much space, characters, I should say, that they'll search on. So I wanted to get the word entrepreneurship earlier in the title and get it to be kind of the key word in the title. So I thought it was really important to get that. And so I played around with various different titles, and this is the one I came up with. It's sort of a bit of an experiment to see if it helps to increase our listenership or not. And if when people search on entrepreneurship in their podcasting applications, if we'll pop up or not. But I still wanted to keep sort of the unconventional piece in it because that's really the key theme of our podcast is this notion of not interviewing all of the rich and famous entrepreneurs that you heard of, but sort of having conversations with the everyday entrepreneur, ones that we can always identify with and that we can relate to and aspire to.
I like it. And Bela, other sharp-eared listeners will note that we've taken a few months off from between episodes of this podcast, but we're back now. And the focus is now on bringing you maybe fewer but more interesting guests. We do get a lot of people interested in being on the podcast, which I find fascinating. But we have a fairly high bar on who we think is interesting. You and I see eye to eye on a lot of things, Bela, and so we always want to make sure that we find somebody that's really interesting and has a valuable story to tell. So that said, Bela, who's today's guest?
Yeah, so Andy Mowat is today's guest. He is the founder and CEO of Gated, and I found this to be really interesting. So it's a super interesting product that I think has the potential of changing how we all receive and read our emails. So Mike, let me ask you a question. You're still working and gainfully employed. So how many emails do you get a day?
Good question, Bela. It fluctuates a little bit depending on the time of year, how close to exams it is, things like that. Summer, the traffic's a little lower, but I would say on a typical weekday, I get about 100 pieces of email. Not including advertising and junk stuff, and about half of those are ones I have to take action on. So dealing with email is actually often a pretty big chunk of my day, especially mine come in two languages, right? German and English. And English is easy, but the German ones take a lot of time. So I usually am spending at least 1 to 2 hours every day, no matter what, on email. So it's a big part of my workflow.
Yeah. So Andy's company, which is named Gated, basically places a fee to the sender in a form of a contribution to their favorite charity in order to get the email into your inbox. So I was very intrigued by this concept. And, Andy's a serial entrepreneur. He's been around the block. This is not his first rodeo, as they say. So he knows what he's doing. And we had a great conversation. So let's jump right into the interview. Hello, Andy. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a while since I've been on Skype, so let me know if what I'm missing to be able to do. How is that looking?
It's looking just fine. Just so I can adjust the levels on my recorder here. Say your full name and what you had for breakfast this morning.
Yes, Andy Mowat. It's pronounced Mowat rather than Mowat. And breakfast was a smoothie and some cereal.
Ah, very nice. Very nice. Well, welcome to the podcast. Thank you very much for agreeing to be on the show. Appreciate it.
Oh, thanks a lot. I love your approach, and we definitely have a unique story. So look forward to chatting all through it.
Well, great. Hey, so where are you physically, geographically?
I live in California near San Francisco, a little bit south.
Oh, okay. Great. I spent about 7 years in Sacramento.
Oh, that's neat. I know it well. I used to work for the family that owned all the Century movie theaters out there, and got to know Sac pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I started a business out there with a couple of folks, and this is back in the 90s. And we had a great time out there in California. We sort of lived east of Sacramento, up in the foothills. So it was quite nice. We didn't get as hot up where we were as it did in Sacramento, because Sacramento can be
Which
pretty
town
brutal.
were you in? Were you a 50 town or an 80 town?
80. Yeah.
Okay. I'm a 50 guy. So.
Oh, yeah. We lived in Granite Bay.
Oh yeah, that's beautiful area.
Right by the lake, right by Folsom Lake there, and just upstream from Folsom Prison. So that was
People
over.
don't realize that the two are there. But yeah, they are. Hopefully, you were long after the Johnny Cash days. But
Yes. Well, again, thank you very much for being on the show, Andy. So tell me a little bit about Gated and what Gated does. This is the company that you're founder of and CEO.
maybe I start with the story of how we came up with it, and it explains kind of how Gated works as well too. But
Sure.
I've been a business-to-business exec, B2B exec for a long time, and grown a lot of companies. And as part of that, you get sold a lot of things. And about 3 years ago, I wrote an email for all the people that annoyed me with all their emails that said, "Thanks for your email, but I don't know you. Your email didn't reach my inbox. Here, if you'd like to donate, here's my Venmo link, and here's my charity. And if you want to do that, I will guarantee I'll read your email. I won't guarantee I'll reply to it." And I started sending that out with nothing behind it, and people started paying. And they didn't just pay, but they paid more than we were asking for. So I'd be asking for a dime or a quarter, and people would pay me $20 because the charity resonated so much, or because they wanted to get through to me. And so I turned that into a business, and happy to talk a lot more about it. So Gated, in essence, is trying to solve the problem of the flawed economics of email. There's no marginal cost to send email, so people send an absolute ton of email.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, that reminds me of when you said there's no cost to sending email. In the early days of email, I worked at IBM, and we had our own internal email system, but it's sort of before the external email system really took off. So we used to send emails internally all the time. And I had this notion that we needed some kind of tax on an email. So every time you added another person to the distribution list of your email, you should get a little shock or something in your chair, or some sort of, because to add one person is just as easy as to add 1,000.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, you'd get copies of emails that I didn't need to know. It didn't matter to me at all. It's like, why are you sending me this, and cluttering up my my inbox? So if I understand what you said there, is you're sort of putting a gate,
Yes.
pardon the pun, on sort of emails coming into you. And these are from people who are fundamentally trying to sell you something?
That's exactly right. It's yes, you nailed the problem and the solution, and it's fun to hear you talk about how you thought about it. It's amazing the number of people that have said, "Oh, I thought about something like this." And actually, in 2004, Bill Gates was at a conference and was asked, "Bill, aren't you worried about spam?" And he said, "No, I'm not. Somebody will figure out how to put a small monetary cost on email." And so we've been inspired by that, and we've watched all the other people that have tried to do it. But yes, we are effectively putting a small tax, but less on when you send it, more on when it's received.
Okay.
And I just got a note, Bella, that my video is stopped and
Yeah.
frozen. Are you seeing that as well?
Yes, your video is frozen.
I don't know how to unfreeze it. Let me try.
Just
really
turn it on
quickly.
and turn it off again. Try that.
I will try that and see if that solves the
Yeah.
problem.
Well, you're
Yep.
you're moving again. So
Terrific. Apologies for that.
no, that's okay. We're back. So, email's been around for eons, or at least it seems
Yes.
that way. And so how do you sell this to your customers, right? So what's the email that you send to people to get them to read it and to buy into this proposition?
That's terrific. So first off, we don't sell it. We actually are giving it away for free. Think of how Google gives away search, but they are able to monetize from the other side. So we take a small portion of the donation. So that's one of the beautiful things about it. This is our vision and our mission is to give this away free to every single person that uses email. And so we have this natural viral loop because every time we send out a challenge email, more and more people learn about what we do. So we are definitely in the early stages reaching out to core target people and explaining to people, and people are signing up. But what we've really tried to do here is create something that is viral in nature, and that's how we're approaching it.
So who is your target? Who's
Our sweet spot today?
Yeah.
Eventually, we're building this for every single person that uses email. We're seeing tons of people sign up for everything from personal email addresses to work. Our core sweet spot today is business to business folks that own buying decisions that are not talking directly to customers and prospects. So marketing, operations, finance, product, IT, security, all are people that have a lot of buying decisions that get hammered by emails, but aren't day-to-day talking to customers, for sure.
So I have a challenge for you. Can you set up a system like this for my cell phone? So the next time that the person wants to sell me a policy to extend my car warranty, that they can donate $1 to some charity?
I love that question. We get a version of that probably every day. When people hear about Gated, they say, "Oh my God, can you give it to me for my cell phone? Can you give it to me for LinkedIn? Can you help me with Slack?" And so the bigger vision that we're working on is your time and that attention you have. Every time you're interrupted, it makes you less efficient, right? Charles Duhigg, I think, said the ultimate productivity hack is to spend more time focusing. And so the bigger mission for what we're doing is to help you protect your time. Today, we've definitely started with email, and we think there's a real value in that focus. But we do think a lot about how do we extend it to other platforms. We do think Apple's doing a pretty good job of, and AT&T and those folks are doing a great job on solving the phone. But yes, this problem is not just with email.
Yeah. Yeah. So who decides what the tax is or what the fee is?
So the user, we believe this is really important. The user decides both their donation amount and the nonprofit that they would like the money to go to. We start everyone off with the same donation amount, but then we allow people to move themselves up. So we've seen some CEOs and other influential people move their donation levels up pretty significantly. I think that's maybe one of the differences between what we do or LinkedIn, right? Where LinkedIn has proven the model and you can message anybody with an in-mail credit, but a senior executive and an early career person cost the exact same to reach. And so we believe that there is a different price for every person out there.
Interesting. So, I reflect back on 30, 40 years ago when you were trying to get sales leads. You did it through a piece of mail, or you went to a trade show and you collected little cards that people filled out, little bingo cards and things. And there was a high cost to those things. There was
Yes.
a pretty high cost per 100 leads, or whatever metric you wanted to use. And so what are if pregated, so prior to having a tool that you have, what the sort of economics are of regular email? If I send out, 1,000 emails and I'm
Yes.
trying to sell something, or I'm trying to reach a certain, demographic, what's my response rate?
That's the most powerful piece about what we do. So today, cold email across the board, and we've gotten this from most of the companies, is 1% to 2% reply rate, right? Salespeople in particular, but lots of folks are shooting email into a void, and they're not hearing back at all. With Gated, and this is the most powerful stat we see, and we track it all the time, is the percentage of replies for donated or promoted emails is above 50%. And so what we think about a lot is the world we're trying to create is one that's better for the users because they get less email and that email is more relevant. And for the senders, which is instead of sending 100 and getting 2 replies, they can send 10 and get 5 replies. And so it really changes both the user side and the sender side.
Yeah. So if I'm a sender, how do I pare down my list of 1,000 down to 100? What's the, what is there a tool that I use for that? I mean, right. You buy mailing lists, you buy these lists oftentimes when you're doing cold stuff. So how do I get that more focused down?
Well, I think that's what we really want to create the potential to do. So there's tons of tools out there that help marketers, sellers, both find companies, but then also pare that down. You can pare it down by what tech stack are they using, what demographics are they, where are they located, how big are they, how many employees, what's their funding. I think the problem today is because it costs you nothing to send to 10,000, you send all 10,000 companies.
Right. Exactly.
But if you're living in a world that is gated, you're able to live in a world where it actually makes more sense to focus more of your efforts on writing better quality communications to a smaller group of people than spraying and praying. So we're trying to fix the incentives so it's not about spraying and praying anymore.
Yeah. So how does this sort of relate to online advertising? In other words, when I'm doing something in Google search or whatever my favorite search engine is, I get all those little ads, and there's a certain cost to put those there. And then you can, pay more to get positioned. And then once someone clicks on it, there's an additional cost. And then if I actually buy something, right, it's a tiered pricing strategy there. So how does this sort of fit into that?
Yeah, there's this ultimate irony, right, which is in any other marketing channel, and email effectively is a marketing channel. It's just a free one. In any other marketing channel, if 2 marketers want to reach one person, they bid it up, one marketer wins, and they get the ad. In email, everyone just sends you a lot of email. What we're doing here is we're effectively creating email as an ad unit, and we're giving the benefits of that to the user rather than to a company, or at least we're giving the vast majority of that to the user's charity.
Got it. So if I'm the target for all these emails, I assume there's something that goes on my email side, some script or something that helps me filter these out and sort of separates the email I get from my mother and the email I get from the insurance salesman. How does that part work? Yeah.
Yeah. We think that executives and people like you, they don't want to change their workflow, right? The last thing people need is another tool. And so what we've done for today on Google, and we'll do it soon for others, is you've seen those buttons that say sign in with your Google account. You just do that. And when you do that, we are able to see who has sent and received to you. We never look at the contents of the email. We think that's really important. And so in essence, we can see who you sent to for the last 2-3 years. And we know that if you've sent to them, you trust them. We can also say, hey, here are some domains that you send to frequently. And you can say, yes, I trust those no matter who's sending from those. That's the simplistic form. There's a lot more intelligence behind it.
And that's sort of how a spam filter works to some extent, right? Or one of the facets of a spam filter.
Yeah. We think we're really focused more on productivity than spam. We think that we will never beat Google at looking at the contents of an email and making those decisions. And frankly, we think that data is so secure and important that we don't touch it. And so we actually don't think we're a spam filter. We think we're much more of a productivity tool. And we leave the world of the spam to Google, who does it better than anybody. But the concept, we're effectively making decisions based upon your relationship strength with people, who you know and who you trust. Google and spam filters are making the decisions based upon what's the content of that email.
Got it.
I think the other interesting thing is spam filters assume everyone should be in your inbox, and they should use data to pull out. We take the other paradigm, which is we think nothing should be in unless you trust them. And so we're definitely taking a different approach on that. And we do think we're actually complementary with what Google does for spam filters or any of these other places.
Yeah, very nice. So let me just switch subjects here a little bit, talk about the business. Are you guys venture funded? How'd you guys start?
Yes, we raised money. When I started first talking to venture folks, they all said, oh, Email. I've never seen a great email investment. Everyone's trying to build a $30 tool to help people manage their email. And we're trying to do something different. We're trying to give that tool away free and monetize it in a different way. And so I think the people that really understood what we were doing were the go-to-market executives, the sales and marketing folks that have lived this problem.
Yeah,
so
the guys who've been sending out millions of emails.
yes, in 4 days in April, we raised an initial round. We also took some really special investors, right? So Bill Gates, his former technical chief of staff, spent 3 years on this problem inspired by Bill. And when I met him, he ended up investing on the spot that day. And so we've got a lot of folks, and then since then we've added some funds. But we haven't fully announced all the folks behind us yet. But we're out to change the world, and we think to do it right, we'll need to raise more money over time.
Yeah.
And so we're about to start to announce it more publicly, and you're one of the first places we're doing that.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you very much. So, talk to me a little bit about. I'm going to change the subject again. Let's go back to Andy as a 10-year-old kid. Where'd you grow up? What was your family like? Siblings, etc.
Yeah. I Bay Area, born and raised. Siblings, two younger siblings, and then went off to college in New Jersey at Princeton for figuring that if I didn't leave California, I never would. And then I kept going east. I went to New York to be an investment banker. I actually ended up living in London for a couple of years and then running a grocery store chain in Eastern Europe. And there's a crazy story behind that one. And then finally I made it back to California and just realized how great California was and how great technology is as a business.
Well, okay. So you left that hanging out there. So tell me about the grocery store chain in Eastern Europe.
So I took 9 years of French in high school and in middle school, and I went to Princeton and I failed the French placement exam. And so I felt like an absolute idiot. And they said, congratulations, you got to take 2 more years of French. And I said, under no circumstance am I going to take 2 more years of French. So what was going on in the world in 1991 was Eastern Europe was falling apart, and it was really interesting to me. And so I effectively did a matrix analysis, and Czech was the most anglicized characters, was one of the most beautiful cities in Prague, and it turned out there was a former CIA spy that was running the Czech program at Princeton, or at least that's how I tell the story. And so I took 2 years of the language and got much deeper in the history, the economics, and all of that. And so when I was in London and we bought a Czech grocery retailer, I happened to be the guy with the language abilities, and it's not a bad place to spend a year and a half in Prague.
Oh, very nice. And so what did you learn from that roll-up process?
The roll-up process in Eastern Europe?
Yeah.
I mean, I was managing people that were 60, 70, that had been living their entire professional lives under communism.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
They would literally wake up at 3 a.m., go to work at 5, and be done by 2, and they were motivated by very different things. And so I had to learn how to lead people, how to communicate and do business in a language that wasn't mine, and I wasn't fully fluent. So I had to work with a translator. I had to learn how to inspire people, and I had to learn how to have people that have like incredibly different perspectives in life, motivate those people.
Yeah.
So it was a big eye-opening experience for me, moving from the intellectual side of banking to the real business world.
Yeah. And I mean, you not only are you sort of had all those challenges, but you're talking about a huge cultural change for those individuals.
Yes.
Right? Because the communism sort of collapsed. And so all of a sudden their world is drastically different.
It was absolutely amazing. And it was just to see everything about how they viewed the world, how they viewed authority, how because they went from, as you said, they kind of had a binary change that happened very fast, and versus a lot of other places where it had happened over time. And so it was really interesting to see.
Yeah.
Yes. And I guess the same thing played out in China. The ironic thing is I didn't stop to think that the Czech Republic only had 10 million people in it. So the value of learning that language wasn't as great as Chinese, for example.
Right. Well, you traded French for Czech.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, It's interesting talking about this because I was born in Hungary, and so after World War II, Hungary was behind the Iron Curtain, communist, and my mom talks about her father and how pre-communism, he used to get up like at 4 a.m. and go work out in the fields and come home at dark, and he was really tired and all that stuff. And then communism came after the war, and he used to say, "I've never had a better life because I go to work at 7, I'm home at 3, and I get a paycheck, and it doesn't matter whether I work hard or whether I work none at all." But of course, he lost all his land. There's sort of other trade-offs, and then as capitalism and Hungary was one of the more progressive countries from the point of view of capitalism, I'll say, and inching its way towards that, and then sort of the whole notion of a capitalistic sort of economy got stronger and stronger and stronger. And then my mom again tells the story about how her father got like real excited then because there was a direct relationship between sort of what he was doing and sort of the results of it. Did you see any of that happening in sort of your tenure there in Czechoslovakia?
Yeah, it's I probably was more insulated than most. I lived 4 blocks from the Charles Bridge. I walked into a Western apartment in the evenings, and at the same time, like I'd go to random places and play company soccer games in little tiny towns. So I probably didn't get to know the people as well as I could have. So I maybe didn't see it, but it was an amazing life-opening experience of realizing how different cultures can be than the United States.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. And people say the California culture is different than other parts of the United States, for sure, right? Even in the United States, we have this huge cultural diversity from, various different states and even within a state geographies, right? San Francisco is very different than Los Angeles, is very different than Sacramento. And we have the same thing in New York, which is where I'm at. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's, I've found this passion for travel, and in the last 2 years with COVID, you can't do it anymore. So it's, I think that's one of the dangers of this time we're living in right now is people stop appreciating all these different cultures as much.
Yeah. So let's go back to gated. How does this change the dynamic between the buyer and the seller?
So there are 10,000-ish tools helping sellers, senders send more email. So there's even the term marketing automation, right, where you've effectively just automated this monolith where every individual email isn't sent. So already I think, buyers or users are at a massive disadvantage. One of the folks at Gartner actually coined the term. He's like, "Oh my God, you're building buyer automation." I think we are. Our bigger vision is we want to give users of email, we don't just call them buyers, but users of email, the ability to defend their own time and determine who they want to connect, who they want to kind of start to talk to, when they want to start to talk to them as well too. And so our true vision in this is to equalize the arms race just a little bit. Everyone that's sending to you, or the vast majority of emails, I think I found some stats of 90% plus of emails aren't sent by people; they're sent by automation, and maybe even more than that. And so we're just trying to give kind of a balance back in that equation. It's interesting. The reactions to people when we do this, we are doing a social experiment, right? Because people are used to email being free and every email hitting your inbox. And so we've actually, we've got to come up with a bunch of analogies, right? It used to be really strange to get in a stranger's car. Now it's normal. It used to be strange to have a stranger sleeping on your couch. Now it's normal. And so gated, early on as we start to drive the adoption, it's a different social experiment when people get this, hey, wait, you're sending me a challenge email saying to reach me. If you think about it, though, for years, there have been bots on the other side sending most of those emails. And so our vision really is to bring about more parity and give the users who are just overwhelmed in life in everything they do, whether it's Slack or email or whatever, we're trying to give them some power in that equation.
Yeah. Yeah. And how does this, I guess I'm thinking about, I'm a small startup and I'm trying to market and sell my products, and my competition is a large Fortune 500 company. And I look at sort of their marketing budget and, their ability to pay to get somebody to open an email is different than my ability to fundamentally pay to open an email. How do you sort of think about that?
So I'd say companies wise, it's actually a fairly easy answer, but there's an interesting diversity and equity that I'll touch on in a second. So, I mean, think about it like Facebook or Google Ads, right? It's the same thing. The ad is either going to pencil or not. You're going to say, listen, that person's time is worth me to pay for it or not. So if you're in the business world, I think, we're just, it's funny, we're putting a cost on something that's never had a cost on it before, and so people have a interesting initial reaction to it. And so I think in that case, I feel very comfortable that we're actually just creating a better use of a scarce resource, which is users' time. Some of the areas we do think about from an equity perspective are, maybe a disadvantaged person that's trying to reach out for their first job and network in and things like that. And I think that's where the charity aspect, we can actually give back and help in that. And so they're not perfect answers to those questions, right? It's remember when the congressman was asked, "What's the definition of pornography?" And he said, "I know it when I see it." I think that's the exact same thing, right? In email, and what is a relevant email or not? You know it when you see it. And so I think we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we make the world better for everyone. I think I would argue that if you're a disadvantaged person and you're sending today, you're getting stuck in an email box with a ton of other stuff. If we can clear out that noise, it's still about, is that $1 or $2 or $3 worth it? I think that's the other thing too, is we didn't ever get into it, but our donations range from $1 to $10. Those are the minimums. One of the most interesting things is 40% of people donate more than we ask for. Right. So if we ask for $1, we'll get a $50 donation sometimes because the charity means so much, or they really want to make an impression on our users. And so the amount to get into the inbox is not prohibitive. We're not charging hundreds of dollars for this.
So is that for example, is that $50 per email, or how does that help me understand that a little bit more?
So the minimum amount that we default everyone to is $1.
Okay. So $1. Yeah. Use that example.
Yeah. $1 per email. It is, if you donate and it comes through, the user then has the determination of do they want to engage with that or not. If they reply, you're good forever, for as long as they're okay with it. If they don't reply, presumably you probably need to pay for the next one as well too. And so it's super smart, and the user doesn't need to do anything to be able to allow you. It just happens automatically because we see if they replied or not. So it's $1 for every impression, but the second somebody says, "Hey, you're good," then you don't have to pay anymore.
Yeah, yeah. So is there also a bidding process going on here? In other words, let's say I'm a car company and I'm car company A, and I'm sending out emails because I want to sell cars to a certain audience, and I'm car company B, and one of them pays $1 and the other one pays $2. And let's say the same person gets both of those, or the same person is targeted for those two emails. Does that person get both of those emails?
Because those emails aren't coming at the same time, there's not an active bidding process. But what we see is we generally, we'll take off between 20 and 40% of your inbound email, all the stuff that's irrelevant. That's kind of what we see. In exchange, we're kind of trying to work with the users, and we coach them to dial it into between 5 and 10 donations a month.
Got it.
And so if you're starting to see, we had one user, he was a CEO, we put him on, he's like, "What price should we start at?" And he said, "Start at $1." He got 12 donations in the first week. So we dialed him up. And so so it's not a bidding process on every single email, but over time, between our coaching and the system starting to provide inputs to people, and just the decisions of the users, that price kind of gets dialed up over time.
So basically what you're saying is you're hopefully weeding out all the stuff that I have absolutely no interest of dealing with, but I just still have to go through and delete it, at least in my inbox.
Bingo. Yeah, we want when you come in today, the first 10 minutes is spent on deleting stuff that's irrelevant. We want you to come in and everything in that inbox to be relevant.
Yes.
Either it's somebody you know, or it's somebody that's made a conscious decision of, I just sent an email to Bella. Oh my gosh, Bella's asking me to pay $1. Is this relevant to Bella? Because if it's not, I shouldn't pay. And
Right.
so we force that decision. And so everything in that inbox is then you're starting from a position of it's good, it's relevant, and it's a pleasure versus the other. And so we had an outage, and our users were pinging us being like, when is this back? I miss it. My productivity is terrible. And so we know we've given something of real value to people.
Got it. Super. So are there, I want to wrap this up. We've been at it about 30 minutes. Is there anything I should have asked you that I haven't?
Yeah. So there's a fun one to ask around kind of my story when I got back to California. I'd say two things that definitely influenced me around the concept of productivity. One is I read Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Work Week, and it just changed my mind. And I immediately picked up the phone and said, I want to go work at Elance or Odesk, and got offers at both and ended up working for a couple of years there. And was really fascinated by that. But I also, out of that, ended up running a virtual assistant outsourcing company for 3.5 years. So we had VAs in Latin America and in Asia, and we basically worked with busy executives to outsource all of their pain. So I got to see this problem at a really intimate level for 3.5 years. And one of the tasks that every executive would ask us to start off is, I'm overloaded by email. Can your assistant do that? And I came to the belief that that is the worst task to outsource to an assistant, because the context is so high on email, right? It's hard. You don't know all the things that are in my mind around that person. If they say, hey, Bella, I was just referred to you by so-and-so, or I see we know this person in common, but that person's irrelevant. It's a very hard decision. So it's kind of exciting because we think we can take off that initial triage for all these people that are overwhelmed. And so it's fun. I've been studying these productivity problems for years. And
Yeah.
We're having a lot of fun with Gated.
Yeah. And that example you just gave about the context is important.
Yes.
How does Gated solve that?
We don't solve it, but we are able to. So it's the job of a salesperson to beat all the hurdles, right? To get into your inbox, to, in a genuine way, still trick you into reading the emails, beat the spam filters, get through the undeliverability issues. And so we basically say, if I don't know you, and I haven't communicated with you before, here's a gate. And so what it does is but we're smart enough to say, hey, if you and I are emailing and then you introduce somebody else, we're smart enough to do that. So it's a rules-based system with a little AI coupled in with it today, and a lot more soon, that is intelligent enough to make that first level of triage for somebody.
Yeah. So as you were saying that, it got me thinking. So can I put different prices on different people sending me emails?
It's coming.
Okay.
It's not here today. It's one of the most exciting things we think about, right? Because somebody that's selling you a list or an offshore software development should cost a lot, because you those are dead. We don't look at the emails to do that. But one of my favorite quotes is from a venture capitalist. He said, if someone's trying to sell me wealth management or private jet travel, it should cost $100 an email. And if somebody's sending me a new business idea to invest in, that should be a penny. And so I think we think a lot about how do we do that. And if we are the trusted defender of your time,
Yes.
you start to feel comfortable telling us what you're interested in and what you're not in.
Yeah. Do you have any competition? Who are there other people? There's a lot of people, like you said, trying to reinvent email in one form or another. What kind of people are you banging up against?
We don't yet. Talking to you, somebody may listen and do it. There have been probably about 20 legitimate attempts of something around this idea, and I've studied them all. I'd say there are tons of people trying to reinvent email. Most people are trying to. Here's how we say it. Gated, there are tons of tools that help you manage the mess better. gated stops the mess from ever happening in the first place. And so there's tons of people that are reinventing your client and helping you do all that. That's not our focus. We think a lot about it, and we think it's a big idea. But our goal is to change society, and we welcome the competition because we think this is something that needs to happen.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a great way to end. Andy, thank you very much for agreeing to be on the show. I really appreciate it. And it's been a pleasure chatting with you.
It has as well, Bella. Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't get to ask you a bunch of questions. I'm fascinated by your story, but I will continue to listen to more of the podcasts, and really a pleasure talking to you today.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Well, Bela, you were right. That was really an interesting interview with Andy. Lots to think about and lots to digest. Let's start with your thoughts.
Well, conceptually, I really like the notion of a better filter on my emails. Even being retired, about 50% of what I get goes right into the trash. Most of them I don't even need to open. I can just tell by who it's from or what the title is that it's trash. And I use Gmail, and in there I can mark things as spam, or I can mark things as unsubscribe. They've made that part is easy to sort of help them filter emails better into my spam folder. But man, I still get a lot of them. And I'll tell you, like you, when I was working, I'd spend several hours a day going through emails, and I was always paranoid about throwing something out that I shouldn't, right? That's going to come back and bite me at some point in the future. And so I think having some type of tool that does a better job at that is really needed.
Interesting. I totally agree. And, this is an interesting example of applying economics, which some call the dismal science, I might add, to the problems of everyday life. And I think this is a problem that everybody can relate with. But particularly, I like this idea in the specific context where Andy was originally developing this idea. So managers and people who have a lot of sales calls of people trying to get in front of them, whether it's somebody who's trying to sell you an industrial product or people who are trying to get an interview for a job, something like that. I think this is a really interesting kind of concept. But I really like your point about thinking about startups and Fortune 500 companies as different types of users, and they might have different needs and kind of different limitations on the resources they have that they could throw at a problem like this. And I was trying to think about how I might apply this concept in my world, where most of my emails are from students and academics who want something from me typically. But these are not exactly people that might be happy about having to donate some money in order to get through to me. And, after all, I work for the state of North Rhine-Westphalia. I'm a public, my university is public, and I'm a public servant. I'm a German civil servant. So there could be an ethical issue there with actually having to pay people to get access to a civil servant. But that's kind of a separate a use case and a small issue. But I did think about maybe students would have to prove that they did their homework before their email comes through to me. I'm kind of kidding about that, but I like thinking about this. So yeah, that was kind of my thoughts. And I'm just a little curious about the revenue model that he talked about how they're going to skim a little bit off each donation. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I first I wanted to comment on what you were saying there, because it got me thinking about my son Jason, who's the computer wizard. He's a software guy in the family, and whenever I'd get a new device or something, I'd call him up to ask for help, and then he instituted the 1 hour rule, and he said, Dad, don't call me unless you've spent at least an hour trying to figure it out on your own, and that's reasonable. And
I like that.
I think back. Yeah, and I think back. This is not dissimilar to that, right? It's putting a barrier in there, and I think back to before we had email, there was a much more significant cost associated with reaching out and doing cold calls to people and sales calls, right? You either had to dial the phone, which meant for every call, every interaction, you're investing time in it as well. And now I can invest the same amount of time whether I'm sending one email or whether I'm sending 10,000 emails. So the price for the sender, or the pain threshold for the sender, has come way down. And it's really made it possible for them to, as we all know, send out all sorts of spam, which was much more difficult in the old days of when you had to lick stamps or you had to pick up the phone to call somebody. So having some sort of mechanism to balance out that equation a little better than it was in the past, like it was in the past, I should say, I think is a good concept. And how you do this equitably is a real challenge, right? You have different groups of individuals. If IBM's trying to get through to people, they have sort of one budget for marketing and sales, or a new company has less, or like your students, you have different types of interaction. So it's not something that sort of works across the board, or at least you have to have ways of tailoring it. Now, he did say to me, as we were chit-chatting after we turned off the recorder, I said, so I'll let you know. I said, Andy, I'll let you know when the podcast comes out, but of course I'm going to have to make a contribution to something in order to do that. And he goes, well, actually what happens is you get back an email that says, hey, I'm using Gated, you make a contribution. And then there's actually a little box you can check that says, I know Andy. And if you check that box, then the email goes through. So
interesting.
Right. So but again, that works on a personal level because it's coming back to me. I'm opening it, I'm reading it, and then I'm checking the box. So it sort of, again, puts another filter in there for sort of sending out 1,000 emails. I think it's interesting concept. It's something that people have been working on for a long time in many different ways, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of traction happens here. And how does he get paid? I mean, the service is free, right? So they've decided that you can sign up for their service for free. So you would sign up, or I would sign up, and then people sending us emails would and then we can set the price, and we can set how it works and with different categories, but they've decided to use that model, and then take a percentage of those donations, as opposed to charging you or I for their service. What the right business model here is, I don't know. That's a good question. And we'll probably see how that evolves over time as well.
And he's a smart guy. He's probably done some A/B testing or something, looking at it a couple different ways, because it's fascinating to me whether I'd rather pay for it or think, oh, okay, I'm not going to have to pay for it, but the charity's going to lose 5% or whatever the percentage is. It's kind of interesting. But, he's thinking about the equity issues. And I like the fact that he talked about that. He understood that there was some issues there. Like for me, I have a hard time with restricting people to get through a gate based on their ability to have money, even if it's a small amount. I mean, in my world, again, I'm more internationally focused than I used to be in my career, and I regularly get email traffic from professors and staff people and students and potential students in South Africa and Uganda and Chile and Colombia and so on, and where the average income is much lower than the U.S. or Germany, and even 50 cents is a lot in these places, and there's lots of inflation right now, like in Chile and Colombia, and sometimes poor people have awesome ideas and can provide some really great value to me. So, before I would use something like this, I would need to think about the ramifications of this access, of kind of this pay-to-play gate. And you were saying earlier, and I really love this idea, maybe there's some different ideas for gates that you could do that would be more equitable, and that I might choose some different gates than somebody who's a CEO of a company in the U.S. and wants to use the model of the charity donation. So I love the idea, but for me, it's like, okay, this I'm not a typical user of Gated, I don't think. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe this is a tool that solves a part of a problem, but there's a much bigger problem as you say, and this notion of making it equitable, and it would be wonderful if I could figure out a way to filter out all of the emails I get from people trying to sell me insurance to extend the warranty on my car or the warranty on my home, right? I'd love for those people to pay $10 in order for their email to get through to me and have that $10 go to, some charity. But how I separate those folks out from a young entrepreneur who heard about me and is trying to contact me because they want to have a 15-minute conversation about their idea. How do I distinguish between those two when they're sort of coming in through this big fire hose pipeline of emails? I don't know. And maybe that's where some AI and some tools kind of come in and help people sort through those things. Because that person I want to talk to. I want to talk to that entrepreneur who has a business idea and is looking for some guidance and advice. But I really have no interest in talking to or reading the email from the person who's trying to extend my car warranty. So it's a big problem, and I think it's sort of an interesting approach. And I'm something will come out here in 5 years. My prediction is there will be something here that's much better than what we have today. What it is, I don't know, but it'll be much better than what we have today.
Yeah, but Andy's put himself in a great position to be one of the people that figures that out. This might not be the exact solution right now, but one of the things about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship is, design thinking approach that you and I have talked about before is iteration, and you learn from doing, not from just sitting around thinking about it or talking about it. You're actually building products. You're getting it out there. You're getting user feedback, customer feedback. You got smart people thinking about this stuff. He's obviously got some funding. So I think it's a great story, and I think it's a space to watch. I hope that this is really successful, and I think I totally agree with you that this is probably one tool to solve a problem that he's really clearly identified, that we have and that you identified, about there's zero cost for spam emails and spam phone calls, and it's a way to level the playing field. But I kind of see the future where this is kind of one stream, and there might be some other streams that each of us can configure in our own way to help serve our needs in the best way possible. So yeah, great story, great interesting person, Bela, great find. What do you think? Should we wrap it up?
Yeah, I agree. Let's wrap her up.
Great. Listeners, thanks for joining us today after kind of a short absence and a new name. We hope you found the episode interesting and thought-provoking. And if you have questions about what we've discussed or ideas for future guests, please get in touch with us as always. Our email is still bela.and.mike@gmail.com.
And please do follow the podcast if you haven't already. Just hit that follow button on your podcasting application. So until next time, signing off from upstate New York. See you soon, Mike.
Sounds great, Bela. As always, thanks from over here in Münster, Germany. See you soon, or auf Wiedersehen, as we say in German.